All right, let's welcome in our guy, Duncan Robinson, host of the Long Shot Pod with Davis Reed, probably his greatest claim to fame. For the listener, the YouTube viewer can kind of see this, but for the listener, Duncan is actually renting a house in LA right now, and we all suspect that he's renting a house where porn shoots are held.
Can you confirm?
I mean, I can't confirm or deny. I'll leave it at this. It's very possible. We're out here in the Valley. Actually, since I've been out here, I've recently learned that Van Nuys, I believe it's pronounced, is the porn capital of the world. And we're not in Van Nuys, which is a good sign, but we're nearby. So, yeah, I mean, it has all the makings of what one of those would look like. Not that I've ever been inside one, but yeah, I mean, it's very possible.
Have you ever seen Boogie Nights?
I never have.
Wow. We got to change that.
Wow.
I'll dial it up here soon. Then, yeah.
I think that's a tonight movie for you.
I'm in.
Based on your circumstances.
Tell us about your time in LA. What are you doing? What's your daily schedule like? Are you enjoying yourself? Is it just training for training purposes? Or are you living your life a little bit here?
Yeah, the daily schedule is basically just get up, work out. I'm working with a couple different people out here, a strength and conditioning guy who, has done a great job so far. He's actually the reason why I really came out here in the first place. A guy by the name of Mike G. He's worked a lot with one of your former teammates, Drew Holiday. And basically my logic was like, if I could be 1/5 or 1/10 of what Drew Holiday is able to do athletically, because it's not necessarily like vertically that Drew is incredible. It's just his combination of like strength and, the way he moves. So he does a lot of great stuff. His name is Mike G. So I've been working with him. And then on the court, I'm with another guy by the name of Noah LaRoche, and just kind of bouncing around between those two. And yeah, I got some friends out here with me. So we're just kind of hanging more than anything. It's we're kind of out of the way a little bit in terms of like where the scene is. So kind of prefer it to be that way, but we're also like, having a little bit of fun. Played some beach volleyball on the 4th, which was a lot of fun, but yeah, it's been good so far.
Mike G also has been training Spencer Dinwiddie and doing a lot of his rehab work and getting him ready for next season. I know Mike, he's a great dude, great trainer. He's done amazing things with Drew. Your daily schedule is a lot different than my daily schedule right now, Guy. I got to be honest with you.
I was going to say, what's yours looking like these days?
Well, Tuesday, the golf club is closed. So pretty much every other day right now is just working on my golf game. I don't know at this point in my life, like where I'm going to really gain anything in basketball. So we're trying to tee to green, trying to get really right tee to green. And we're trying to work on that wedge game. We're trying to work on that wedge game. So that's kind of where we're at right now.
What would you say at this point is the strength of your game? Because I'm curious, because we've been talking about playing golf here for a little while, so I'm trying to get an early scouting report.
Well, so I've actually been taking lessons, and the last few rounds I've played, I gotta say, my driver, which has always been my Achilles heel. So you know how in the backswing when Dustin Johnson kind of bows his wrist a little bit.
Yeah.
So I've added that to my at the top of my backswing, and it's changed my driver. I'm hitting the ball in the center of the club face. I'm working on my pivot, and I'm launching that thing right now. But here's what happens in golf: if your driver's working, you can't hit your wedges for shit.
100%.
And when you're scrambling and your driver's not working, you're just dialed in with your irons and wedges. So we're gonna put it together for a round. I haven't quite done that yet. We're still working. We're still
a long
working.
Summer. You got plenty of time.
Duncan, if someone, let's say someone had not watched game 1 of the finals, what would be sort of your summation and description of game 1 of the NBA finals?
That's a good question. Full disclosure, I thought the Suns were going to come out and get game 1. I was interested in, I think there's a couple of things to look at. One being how Milwaukee chooses to guard ball screens. I was surprised that they came out right out of the gates and switched with Brook. I think that Brook is such an interesting part of the series because you can see, I mean, he had 17 points in like 22, whatever it was, minutes, you can see that he's a clear advantage offensively with his size, offensive rebounding. But it's like a matter of who's going to play who off the floor, right? Like who's going to match up to who. So I think the fact that Phoenix was able to get him off the floor, I think you're going to see a lot more Giannis at the 5 moving forward and more Bobby Portis. But I think basically like the combination of the Suns' pace, and a huge part of it is Chris Paul, the way he's able to control the game. Those like little spurts, I kind of really realized it. And obviously you know this, but like so often, particularly I feel like in playoff games, they're determined by those little 2 to 3 minute spurts, whether it be to end a quarter or, you know, right out of a corner, maybe out of halftime, that oftentimes end up determining a game. And I just felt like Phoenix dominated those areas and really for most of the game controlled the pace. And I think and largely that's a big testament to Chris Paul. But I mean, DeAndre Ayton's been incredible in the playoffs as well. And his ability to like match Milwaukee's size, because Milwaukee has the ability to go really, really big. And I think Jay Crowder, I mean, you look at yesterday, he didn't shoot the ball well, but like he's big enough to where he can start out a game guarding Brook Lopez and then still be a mismatch on the offensive end, at least in the fact that he forces you to close out to him. So yeah, that was like a really convoluted way of describing the game, but I'm really interested to see game 2, what adjustments Milwaukee makes, because now obviously all the pressure falls on them to do something differently. And I think my guess would that it'll be more Giannis at the 5, more Bobby Portis, and probably a little bit less Brook Lopez.
The constant sort of noise on Twitter for the last 5 or 6 years is that Bud doesn't make adjustments in the playoffs. And one of the things I said before the series was, with Book and with CP operating out of pick and rolls, Milwaukee's going to have a lot of trouble if they go to that drop coverage with Brook at the 5. And it sounds like they made the adjustment right away. The reason I asked the question, of course, because I didn't watch game 1. That's why I was trying to get a summation of the game. Listen, man, my cable boxes got fried like 5 days ago. We had a little bit of a heat wave, and one of the wires went out in the street. So my power was out for like half a day. They fixed the wire. I got like half of my house running right now. I still am like
you look like you're in a haunted attic.
I was gonna say I didn't know what the poor lighting was a result of, but now it makes a whole lot more sense.
It's just a power move. He doesn't want us to see his face.
Well, I've got many leather-bound books in my apartment. Smells of rich mahogany.
I have a question for you, JJ, about Chris, and I guess Duncan, you too, although you haven't played against him as much. Do you think that these guys are now 4 for 4, the Suns in the playoffs, in terms of sort of like jumping teams out of the gate? Just sort of winning game 1 of the series pretty handily. Do you think that is a tribute to their pace? Do you think that, because obviously, at this point, everyone knows what's coming with them. They're not doing anything totally different, but yet they're still doing it. Do you think that it just takes some getting used to?
I think that's a lot of it. Again, we've talked about this a little bit, but a lot of that is just the attention to detail that CP has as a player and as a leader, and then Monty and staff, i.e. Kevin Young, Willie Green, like that staff is just wonderful. And so they're going to have, this is not a knock on any of the other coaches they've coached against, but they're going to be the Suns are going to be as prepared as any team going into a series. And once you get it within the series, then it's about making those adjustments. And as Duncan alluded to, figuring out those matchups. Here's the thing about CP. I love him, but he is the Derek Zoolander of the NBA. In Zoolander, they say he's only got one look. CP's only got one move. Like when he gets a big on him, he's going to do the LeBron. He's going to dribble with his right hand, and then he's going to gather, sidestep left, and shoot the 3. I for the life of me, the guy doesn't want to drive left ever. And he's good enough that against most people, he can sham God and get back to his right, and he can get in the paint and make plays for other people. But like in the highlights that I saw, motherfucker's either doing his one move or he's getting to his right hand. So I think some of this adjustment will be when there are switches, like, what are we doing with him? It's not just the coverage, it's the strategy.
Doesn't that make him one of the most impressive players in NBA history, though, to be his size? And we talked about this the other day about his size, to be this sort of dominant for this long when defenders basically know what's coming.
He's an anomaly. Duncan, we were talking about this the other day, but like, he's an anomaly in that there's nobody his size that has done this at an all NBA level into his mid, now kind of late 30s. Stockton, of course, is the exception, but he's a little bit bigger than Chris.
Yeah, I think you made a great point in terms of an adjustment in that, and this isn't a knock on him, but he is so good in that mid-range area and when he's out on the perimeter with bigs that it's almost like just make him finish. And that's not to say that he can't finish, but like crawl all the way up into the ball. I didn't necessarily know the keep him left thing. That probably comes from a whole lot of years of playing with him. Mental note on that though, next time I'm switched on to him, because the next time I am switched on to him, I'm for certain it's going to be what I was seeing late in the game, which is basically just push everyone to the baseline and let me go to work. But yeah, I mean, he's the ability to make those shots that everybody now deems as like, taboo. Those are bad shots, those tough twos. I mean, you look at the shot charts and it's like every year he's in the 50s, right around those elbow jumpers or whatever you want to call it, those quote unquote tough twos. But I think that, the longevity of being able to do that over time, and also like he just plays at such a pace. Like the entire game is dictated by his pace. At least it feels that way. I don't know I don't know if you feel differently. I mean, the one move, I know you meant it in a loving way, the one move thing, but for coming from somebody who's been stuck on an island with him, I certainly feel like he has more than one move.
No, he does. He has a few moves, and they're all really good, and he knows how to use them, and he gets to his spot. And I think a theme of the playoffs, again, has been you need guys that can make mid-range shots, because in the playoffs, it's hard to generate really good threes, and it's hard to generate layups. So you need a guy who can play off the dribble and get a bucket. There was some pushback by the Suns when right before the series started. There were some people calling this, I don't want to use the word fluke, but like a fluke, and they've been lucky because they've run into these teams. Anthony Davis was hurt, LeBron's not at 100%, Jamal Murray's hurt, Will Barton's not at 100%, Kawhi's not in the LA Clippers series, the whole way. So it's like they've gotten lucky. I think you can provide a little bit of perspective on this, because there's been some chatter that the Miami Heat run to the finals last year was a fluke. I'm not saying it was. I've just read it on Twitter. So where do you kind of stand on, because I think this speaks more to like an overarching theme about each individual series and each individual playoff run being really unique.
I mean, I'll start by saying this. The tone in which you asked that question certainly insinuated that you were leaning into a belief, idea, or theory that's being thrown around about us being quote unquote bubble flukes last year.
I'm just saying LeBron's burner account, VX789 on Twitter, has been tweeting out some stuff about it. And I read it. That's all. It's not coming from me.
I mean, it's hard, right? Because like injuries, they're a part of the game. Like for anybody to make a run, like things have to fall a certain way. I mean, you look at LeBron coming back from 3-1 in Cleveland, or Toronto's ring, like things had to happen in those two series for them to ultimately become champions. Like it's a part of the game. And if we're just going to just turn around and discredit everything, it's like, all right, well, that just seems like beside the point. Now, are there some legs to like the bubble was truly one of one, never happened before, like a unique circumstance? But at the same time, Like that was a competitive advantage for us. Like we weren't bashful about that. We always felt that way. So for us to turn around and embrace it better than anybody else, well, almost everybody else, I guess you could say that the Lakers embraced it better, is like, I don't know. I feel like that's not really giving us the credit we deserve. Now, obviously, it's not a hot take for me to have this stance, right? Obviously, I'm going to be on the side of that we were, not bubble flukes. But at the same time, like we beat the number 1 overall seed in Milwaukee. We beat a really good Celtics team with basically 4 all-stars. It's not like the ball wasn't being thrown up and we weren't playing a 7-game series at the same time.
I didn't expect him to get so defensive about this. I really did.
It was a little bit of a leading question, I will say, for the record. Duncan, I wanted to ask about the Bucks, because you guys obviously beat them last year. We haven't had you on since then. With the obvious exception of Drew being a personnel difference, is there anything that you noticed about them in terms of strategy or anything really across the board that you feel like, because talk about like a tough team. I mean, every time they were counted out 4 times in that net series. And every time it was Middleton came back, Drew came back. They just hit big shots down the stretch.
Yeah. I mean, I think that the easy thing to do is look at the personnel changes, which I think definitely matter and are probably the first thing you should mention when you're looking at the comparisons from last year to this year. Drew, I think, gives them an entirely different dynamic, both offensively and defensively. And even like some of the other additions around them, like Bobby Portis was awesome in our series. Bryn Forbes was really good in our series. Guys that they didn't have last year that they brought in on, I think, like 1-year deals. PJ Tucker wasn't so great in our series, but obviously was a huge difference maker in that Brooklyn series, and has been, moving forward. So I think the personnel changes are what they are. I noticed, or I've felt watching them, and JJ, you brought this up earlier, more of a willingness to make adjustments. Last year, I remember after game 1 of last year in the bubble, that we were talking about kind of as a team openly about, okay, what can we expect in game 2? And it was pretty much everybody was on the same page of the Milwaukee Bucks are going to do, quote unquote, what they do better. Like they're just going to double down on what they do. And maybe they'll make an adjustment in game 3, 4, 5, whatever down the line, but like they are who they are type of thing. And I've noticed watching them this year, as the playoffs have gone on, they've done different things. How they guarded the Nets was entirely different than how they guarded us. And for good reason. The Nets are a different team and have different personnel. So I think it's a combination of the personnel, but then also a willingness to kind of adapt to the competition, which particularly once you get in a playoff series, adjustments are everything.
I think one of the interesting things about this playoff series, and really going back to the bubble, the end of the season, regular season in March, the break, the bubble playoffs, this condensed season, this run of injuries we've had that we've talked about a ton, and how disappointing it's been that we haven't got to see so many stars play at their best level, or not play at all in some cases, is that our league is about results. And if you're a front office executive, if you're an owner, you're making the next decision, whether it's personnel, coaching, front office, whatever, based on results. And I almost feel like the last 2 years have been a wash. And fan bases are the same way, and probably a little bit as players, but like everything in our league seems like it's a knee-jerk reaction to something. And I feel like Bud, like people were basically saying after game 1 of the Brooklyn series that Bud was going to lose his job, right? And I don't know that they win that series if Kyrie is healthy, or if James is healthy that whole series. I don't know. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. I don't know. But if they lose that series, there's a chance Bud loses his job. As a player, like I go back to like my time with the Clippers. Our last 2 years there, CP and Blake got hurt and couldn't play in the first round against the Blazers. Blake tore something in his foot in the first round against the Jazz. We were leading in both those series. They blew the team up. They blew the team up. Kawhi hits a freak shot, like a 1-of-1 shot, and they blow the Sixers up. And so, we're like, yeah, it's about the result, but some context I think matters. And I don't know. I'm not saying I'm not really asking a question here at all. It's something that I've been thinking about this whole series. And we saw another guy, get announced that he was going down today with Dario Saric touring his ACL, and it's just like, man, it's got to be hard right now to be an executive, to be an owner, and not look at this big picture of these last 2 years and everything that we've been through and sort of make a long-term plan without knowing exactly what you have. Because, hopefully next season's normal.
Yeah. Do you think that what we keep seeing with, for example, the examples you gave Philly blowing it up, or are others examples of it? Do you think that has been more prevalent recently in your career? Like, did you feel that wasn't the case earlier on in your career? Do you think that's always like, I'm curious how much of that is attributed to like the readily available pressure that comes with like a social media crazed fan base where everything is just so like every opinion and every beat writer can just blast their opinion on what it is that's wrong with the Sixers or what it is that's wrong with whoever. Like, is that a result of that, or has it always been that way? We're just now like maybe a little bit more like quote unquote, I guess, sensitive to it.
It's probably accelerated it. The other thing that's happened is there's a ton of new owners, and they have a different mindset. Look at Philly. They've had hundreds of players in the process, hundreds and hundreds of players in the process.
Where are we in the process, by the way?
I don't. You'll have to ask somebody on the Sixers. I don't know where we are in the process.
I was just curious.
I think part of it too is like the player empowerment and players taking more ownership. They're like the owners after the lockout shorten our contracts, and they had previously shortened them right before I got in the league in 05-06. Then they shortened them again in 11 and 12. And then players started signing even shorter deals so that they could control. And the Supermax obviously has a huge factor in all this, but like there's just so much movement and change. And it's not just players. It's personnel in the front office. It's coaching staffs. It's just constant in this league. There's nothing to really say that's constant other than change in the NBA. And I think too, it's like the game has evolved. Like Jared Dudley, for example, when he got drafted, what hurt him was that he was a tweener.
Right.
And now, like, if you can play multiple positions, you're really valuable.
Yeah.
And so you see like the game change, but I think you're right. I think social media, I think the hot take culture, it's all accelerated this. It's accelerated this for sure. Duncan, I gotta ask you something while I have you here, because I know you got to run and play basketball. But we had dinner in March, I think it was March or April, and I did some digging online afterwards, and I found like a bunch of shirtless photos of you, and you are fucking shredded, dude. You are
I did not
shredded.
know where this question was going.
Dude, I had no idea where this question was going.
I thought about texting you, but then I was like, nah, man, I'll just do it next time he's on the podcast. When did this happen? Is this a heat culture thing? When did this happen?
Wait, wow. That one really came out of nowhere. When you first brought up dinner, I'm just racking my brain of like, what is about to come right now? Because we covered a lot of different topics at dinner.
Some topics that we'll never talk about on the podcast.
Right.
How far does JJ want to go tonight?
Right, exactly. We didn't cover anything to do with shirt off pictures, so I'm a little confused as to where that came from.
I don't want to tell you how I got there, but you start going down an IG rabbit hole, and before you know it, you're on some random bloke's feed, and you're like, why am I looking at photos of a shirtless Duncan Robinson?
It's a combination. I mean, Michigan, I improved my body there, but then also since I've been in Miami, I think I've improved it as well. Is the short answer, and I think we could leave it. I think we could leave it at that.
All right,
we're gonna have a question, Doug. There's gonna be a follow up on every time you're on from now on about how shredded you are. This is just a part of the experience.
I can't wait.
I will say, like, in Miami, it's pretty like non-negotiable. I mean, it's like we're getting our weight and body fat checked pretty frequently. So yeah.
So this leads, because I know you got to run and go hoop, but this leads me into my last question. Tommy, you're more than welcome to have a follow-up question or jump in here after I'm done with this. But you said it's non-negotiable in Miami. Your future in Miami is a little up in the air. We're a few weeks away here from free agency. I can't have you on a podcast talking about the NBA and not talk about your free agency. So just, I know you've talked about it on the long shot, but for our listeners, kind of just give a synopsis of your mindset now 3 weeks out from free agency.
Yeah, sure. I did envision this conversation coming at some point. So this one I was at least a little bit more prepared for. You know, for a while there, it was like, I'm just not even thinking about it. Like, we'll see. Now we're kind of getting into the zone where it's like, all right, I'll start to kind of like feel out some different things and start to kind of really think critically about what I'm looking for in a potential destination. And now, mind you, the fact that I'm restricted, I think, changes a lot of things, largely in that, you know, I've really, really loved my experience in Miami. But the reality is, like, I don't know a month from now what it's going to look like. So I'm trying not to, with where I'm at right now, truthfully, like, I'm just trying to keep an open mind. And a big part of that is like not getting too attached to any scenario. Right. And I know I'm speaking incredibly vague, and that's on purpose.
I'll speak for you. I can chime in. So what he's talking, so you don't want to get attached to a team that may be interested. You don't want to get attached to a number. And that's something that I found, like, as I got later in my career, like, I would get so attached to the idea of a number. 100%. And like, if that number didn't happen, like, I would be disappointed. But like,
exactly,
you just sort of add up your contracts and you're good. Like, it's not like you just keep playing and keep hooping. So that's sort of like the attachment part, right? You're
yes.
Yeah. You don't want to be attached to one scenario where you go to one team, or one scenario where you stay with a team, or one scenario where you get a 4-year deal versus a 3-year deal, or X number a year versus X number a year. It's like, you got to kind of let it happen organically. And I learned that later in my career.
Yeah. And that's kind of what I've kind of learned just talking to people, and you put it really well in that. I think the moment you get like fixated on a certain outcome, whether it be number, whether it be destination, then it's like you kind of start getting, not like, you just like get distracted by that, and it becomes like obsessive. So I've really been challenging myself of like, you know what, at some point things are going to come and go, more information will be available. Like, at this point I have such little information. Like, I know what I know, and I know the experience that I've had, but like, I've only had one experience with one team. So like, to see what's out there is like kind of obviously an enticing thought. I mean, to have the opportunity to be a free agent and have some different options is obviously like a coveted position. But at this point, like, I haven't even like entered into that realm, I guess, yet at this point, 3 weeks out. So like, for me right now, it's just more about like, all right, I'm just going to continue to handle my business on the day in, day out, take the information as it comes. And, you know, hopefully at some point the quote unquote right opportunity for me will become clear, and, you know, we'll move forward. If it doesn't, then obviously in comes the stress and anxiety and everything. But like, once again, like, it's a privilege to be in that situation as well. So
sure,
I say
you're gonna have a job next year.
I think so.
You'll be playing somewhere professionally in the NBA. We don't know where.
Yeah. So like that alone, like I always think about that too. Like, when I think about, this number versus this number, or like, oh, I want more than that. It's like, oh my goodness, if the me of like 4 or 5 years ago, when I'm like in my dorm at Williams College, eating like late night peanut butter and jellies, heard myself complaining about this bullshit, like I would slap myself in the face. So with that being said, though, there's still like, you want to feel valued and you want to feel like you're getting what you've earned. So it's kind of like a weird juxtaposition in that sense.
I totally get that.
JJ, I have one follow-up for you, that for both of you, but at what point in your career, so obviously Duncan's got a great agent, Glue, who handles all the stuff for him in general, but at what point, you've always had agents as well, but at what point in your career did you feel like you started to take more sort of, not like control, but you started to think about the basketball fit when you knew you were heading into free agency, and it wasn't just the money thing? And it was more just like, oh, I want to play with this person, I want to play with that person. How long did it take you to get to that place?
I think it was the first contract after my first non-rookie deal. Like Duncan, I was restricted. Orlando told me to go get an offer. They weren't going to offer me anything. They were like, go get an offer and see if we match. And so it was basically, and that was the summer that all those guys were free agents: Chris Bosh, D Wade, LeBron. So I waited like 10 days, finally got an offer from Chicago. I signed it within 6 hours of me getting the offer. I was driving between, I think, Rome and Florence when I talked to Tibbs, and I signed it that night on the Arno River with Chicago. Orlando matched, obviously. But after that, it became more about like that fit. And, I wanted to go to the Clippers so bad because I thought it would be a great fit for me on the court. It'd be a great fit for me off the court, and it would be a chance to win a championship. When the Clippers, it became apparent they weren't going to bring me back, then I really started just thinking about fit on the court. Like, I want to go enjoy basketball. And, I remember, and I've told this story a million times, but I remember a January game, my last year with the Clippers. We were playing against, I think, an 18-win team or a 24-win team in Philly. And they were not good that year. And Joel was out of the game. They came back from like 18 down. They beat us in overtime. There was like 7,000 people in the arena. And I remember thinking to myself, like, dude, if this place like sells out and this team is good, like this could be a really fucking fun place. And so when the opportunity came to go there on a 1-year deal and to play with Joel, and Ben was going to be healthy that year, like it really was just about like the fit on the court. And obviously I got a nice one year bag. But at the time, I mean, I remember, like, to Duncan's point about getting attached and being fixated on a number, I was so attached and fixated on getting a 4-year deal because I was 30. I turned 32 that summer. So I was turning 30, just turned 32. And I was like, I want a 4-year deal. I want to finish my career, on a 4-year deal. And I was disappointed I got a 1-year deal. I wasn't disappointed by the number necessarily, but hey, it all turned out. And, that's kind of how my mindset changed after that first contract when you're restricted.
What about, because you've talked about how you've lately in your career dealt with front offices yourself and not had your agent, reach out on your behalf. When did that change in your career?
Philly. That was Philly.
Yeah.
Some of it was just like building relationships and getting to know EB, of course, and getting to know Colangelo prior to him leaving. But EB, Brett was my second time I signed my 1-year deal. Brett was essentially the GM, getting to know Josh, EB. And then, I obviously had a previous relationship with Trajan, and I got to know Griff really well, in my time in New Orleans. So I think it was just about, like, you get older and like, you'll experience this too, because I hope you play till you're in your late 30s. But like, when you get older, like, you end up gravitating towards people that are in the same life stage as you.
Yeah.
Like I enjoy the time with the young guys. Like I have fun and can relate to them and I spend time with them, go out to dinner, play cards on the plane, whatever it may be. But like your relationships, like a lot of it are just people your age or people at the same life stage as you. And that's honestly, like, that's what made our situation in LA so unique. Was like we were all around the same age and all around the same sort of life stage in terms of like we all kind of had kids at the same time. We were all sort of grown-ups at the same time. So it was a really unique period to be there at that time.